This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
The question slammed into me like a rogue wave, leaving me gasping for air. Do you forgive your wife? It bounced around the empty spaces of my condo, mocking me with its impossible simplicity. The silence amplified it, a deafening reminder of everything that was missing, everything that she had taken. Claire. The name was a phantom limb, a constant ache where joy used to be. I walked through the condo, a ghost haunting my own life. Before, this place had been filled with light and laughter, Claire's easy smile, the aroma of coffee brewing on Sunday mornings. Now it was just a shell, a museum of memories, each one laced with betrayal. I stopped in front of the framed wedding photo, Claire's eyes sparkling, her hand clasped in mine. I wanted to smash it. I first noticed the changes slowly, subtly, like the quiet creep of mold in a darkened corner. Claire, always on her phone, her thumbs dancing a frantic ballet across the screen, even when we were supposed to be connecting. Late nights at the office, her explanation sounding increasingly rehearsed. The excuse used so often, it was like a bad script that lacked substance. The faint floral scent clinging to her clothes, replacing the familiar, comforting vanilla she usually wore. I attributed it to stress, a new project at work, the relentless demands of modern life. I wanted so desperately to believe her. Then came the phone call that shattered the illusion. An accidental butt dial from Claire while she was supposedly at a conference, out of state. The muffled voices. The intimate laughter. A man's voice whispering her name. Tony. I nearly dropped my phone. My blood froze in my veins. My breath caught in my throat. I knew, in that instant, that everything I thought I knew was a lie. The flowers. They felt like a lead weight in my hand. I'd bought them on impulse, a silly romantic gesture. Yellow roses, Claire's favorite. I wanted to surprise her, to remind her how much I loved her. Instead, I found her with him. I can't replay the scene in my mind. The details were seared into my memory, a film I couldn't stop watching. I remember her face draining of color, her eyes wide with panic. I remember Tony scrambling to button his shirt, his face flushed with guilt. I remember the thick, suffocating silence. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just placed the flowers on the table, the yellow roses a splash of cruel color against the stark reality. Then I turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind me. I ended up at O'Malley's, a dive bar down the street, the kind of place where secrets are swallowed and sorrows are drowned. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a lurid glow on the sticky tables. I sat at the bar, ordering a double whiskey, neat. The ice clinked against the glass, a lonely sound. The bartender, a grizzled man with a handlebar mustache and eyes that had seen too much, just nodded. He didn't ask any questions. He just poured the drink, his movements practiced and efficient. I downed the whiskey in one gulp, the burn searing its way down my throat. It did nothing to ease the ache in my chest, nothing to quell the storm raging inside me. The shock was fleeting, a temporary numbness. Then came the rage, not the explosive, volcanic kind that burns everything in its path. No, this was a slow-burning ember, a cold, calculating fury that simmered just beneath the surface. It sharpened my senses, made me methodical, driven. I needed to understand. I needed to know everything. I became a ghost in my own life, a shadow lurking in the periphery. I started following Claire. It was pathetic, I knew, but I couldn't stop myself. Every time I saw her, a fresh wave of resentment washed over me. I kept it all inside. I started digging, researching. Divorce laws, infidelity clauses, financial implications. I needed to protect myself. Protect was mine. I spent hours online poring over legal documents, my eyes burning with fatigue. I even revisited my lawyer friend, a guy named Mark from college. Desmond, this isn't healthy, he said, his voice laced with concern. Let me recommend a good private investigator, someone who can handle this discreetly. I shook my head, stubborn. No, I'll handle it myself. I was afraid of what a professional might uncover. I was afraid of losing control. This was my mess, and I was going to clean it up. My way. The motel. That godforsaken motel. It became my obsession. The El Rancho Motel, a crumbling roadside relic on the outskirts of town. A place where dreams went to die. I felt sick just looking at it. Disgusted. How could she? How could she cheapen our love like that? I needed evidence. Proof. Something concrete that I could use. I needed leverage. I became single-minded on this objective, to the detriment of my responsibilities. I started with the motel staff. Bribes were the only way. I figured there would be someone whose integrity could be bought for the right price. I started with the cleaning crew, a tired-looking woman named Maria. She had a smoker's cough and a sadness around her eyes that mirrored my own. I approached her cautiously, offering her $500 in cash for information. She looked at the money, her eyes flickering with greed and hesitation. I don't know, mister, she said, her voice raspy. Just tell me which room they use, I pressed, sliding the money across the counter. She hesitated. Then her eyes darted around nervously. She scribbled a number on a napkin and handed it to me. Room 12. Be careful, mister, she whispered. Then the front desk. A pimply teenager, bored and indifferent. He wouldn't take money at first. He feared getting caught. I upped the offer. $1,000. His eyes lit up. Morals crumbled faster than I expected. He pretended to look through the camera and said everything was fine. I had to be in and out in 30 minutes. I planted the voice recorder behind the headboard. Small, almost invisible. It would pick up everything. I tested it, whispering into it, then played it back. Crystal clear. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Next, I needed visual confirmation. Pictures. Proof they were together. I bought a cheap camera with a telephoto lens. I set up across the street, in my car, parked under the shade of a tree. Waiting. Watching. Hour after hour, my muscles aching, my eyes burning. I felt like a stalker. My soul was slowly dying. Finally, they arrived. Claire, looking radiant, her face flushed with excitement. Tony, grinning like a smug cat. They walked into room 12, hand in hand. I snapped the pictures, my hands shaking. Evidence. I replayed the recording. It was almost too much to bear. Their whispers, their laughter, their lies. Claire's voice, soft and intimate, the way she used to talk to me. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I had all the evidence I needed. The fury began to die out, replaced by a desolate emptiness. This was what I had been working towards for months. I dialed Tony's number, my hand trembling slightly. His cell rang a few times before he answered. His voice wary. Hello? We need to talk, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Now. He tried to reschedule, stammering about appointments and patients. I'm busy, Desmond. Can we do this later? No, Tony, I said, my voice hardening. Now. Or I come to your office, your choice. He hesitated, then sighed. Fine. Meet me at the Obsidian. 1 hour. The Obsidian. A sleek, modern bar downtown. All glass and steel and minimalist decor. The kind of place where secrets were traded and deals were made. Fitting, I thought. I arrived early, ordering a drink and waiting for Tony to show. I watched him walk through the door, his eyes darting around nervously. He spotted me and approached the table, his face pale. What is this about, Desmond? He asked, his voice tight. I slid the photos across the table. His eyes widened, his face paling even further. He sputtered, What is this? I have no idea what is going on here. Don't play dumb, Tony, I said, my voice cold. You know exactly what this is. He tried to deny it, stammering about coincidences and misunderstandings. I just smiled. a cruel, mirthless smile. I have recordings, Tony, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Witnesses. Don't insult my intelligence. I laid out my terms. A substantial settlement. Enough to cripple him financially, enough to make him regret everything. Or, I continued, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto his, I go to the medical board. I expose you to your wife. I leak these photos to the newspapers. Your choice. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. His hands trembled. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked pathetic, a broken man. You can't do that, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, my voice a low, dangerous purr. He caved. Of course, he caved. He had too much to lose. His career, his reputation, his family. I'll need the money wired within 48 hours, I said, standing up. He agreed. The relief washed over his face as if he was thankful I didn't ask for his life. Consider this a lesson, Tony, I said, my voice hard. Don't ever mess with what's mine. I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting there, his world crumbling around him. The Obsidian seemed too expensive to drink at, so I made my way back to O'Malley's where the drinks were cheap and the conversation was quieter. The legal documents sat on my desk, accusing and stark white. Each page detailed some legal consequence of the choice I was about to make. Divorce papers. They represented the finality of everything, the utter destruction of what I thought my life was. For weeks, I'd been avoiding them, pushing them to the back of my mind. I knew, somewhere deep down, that once I signed them, there would be no turning back. But was signing them really the right thing to do? Mark, my lawyer, kept calling, pushing. Desmond, you need to make a decision. The sooner we get this moving, the better. He'd given me a look that reminded me that I was just another dollar sign to him. He saw it all in black and white. A clear-cut case of infidelity, a wronged husband, a slam-dunk victory. I was the underdog, and he was ready to fight for me. But it wasn't that simple. It never is. There was Anna to consider, a constant voice in the back of my head. The memory of her laughter, the way she snuggled into me when she was scared, her unwavering belief that I could fix anything. How could I do this to her? How could I tear her family apart? And then there was Claire. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, there was still a part of me that loved her. Or maybe it was just a ghost of the love we used to share, a lingering attachment to the woman I had built a life with. I remembered our wedding day, the vows we had exchanged, the promises we had made, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Were those just empty words? Were they meaningless now? I looked at the documents again, each page a nail in the coffin of my marriage. Anna. Her little smile, the gap-toothed grin. I couldn't bear to have that taken away from her. She's unfit, Desmond. You know that. Mark would say to me over the phone, think about what's best for Anna. His words were like a knife twisting in my gut. Was he right? Was I being selfish, clinging to a broken dream when I should be putting my daughter first? The phone rang again. It was Mark. I stared at the caller ID, hesitating. Desmond, I need those documents. I need to file them this week, he said, his voice flat. Demanding. Mark, I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mark sighed. Desmond, you're making a mistake. You're letting her get away with this. Maybe, I said. But I can't hurt Anna. I hung up the phone and rubbed my temples. Trying to ease the tension that had been building for months. I needed to think. To clear my head. To find some kind of clarity in the chaos that had become my life. Just as I was about to put the papers away, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Mark. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, I picked it up. Hello? I asked, my voice wary. Desmond? It's Sarah. It's Claire. Her voice was trembling, barely audible, and filled with a chilling fear that sent a jolt of ice water through my veins. My grip tightened on the phone, my knuckles turning white. "What's wrong, Sarah? What happened?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic. It's Claire. She was attacked. At the grocery store." Sarah's words tumbled out, fragmented and frantic. Mika did it. Tony's nurse, Mika." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, a feeling so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. Mika? But why? What are you talking about? She cornered Claire in the parking lot, yelling about how Claire ruined Tony, how she stole him away. Then she just... Sarah's voice broke down, choked with sobs. "She had a knife, Desmond." She slashed Claire's face. My breath hitched. This couldn't be happening. It felt like a nightmare, a grotesque escalation of my own actions. I was a participant in an awful scenario I could not control. "Sarah, where are you? Is Claire okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We're at St. Luke's. They're stitching her up. The police are here. It's..." Sarah paused, struggling to compose herself. "It's bad, Desmond. Really bad." I slammed the phone down and ran out of the condo, my mind racing. Mika, a nurse, attacking Claire? It was insane. The carefully crafted plan I had put in motion, the meticulously gathered evidence, the confrontation with Tony, they all seemed insignificant in the face of this brutal act of violence. What had I unleashed? I sped to the hospital, the images Sarah had painted in my mind burning behind my eyes. Claire, her face disfigured, her life potentially ruined. Guilt washed over me, a tidal wave of remorse and regret. I had wanted to punish her, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me, but I never wanted this. I arrived at the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah met me in the waiting room, her face pale and drawn. She wrapped me in a hug. "She's stable," Sarah said quietly, "but she's in shock. The police want to talk to you," Sarah continued, her voice barely a whisper. "They know about Tony, about the affair." I nodded, numb. I was ready to confess everything. I wanted to take responsibility for the mess I had created, even if it meant going to jail. How bad is it?" I asked, dreading the answer. Sarah hesitated. "It's a deep cut, Desmond. They don't know yet if it will scar permanently. But it's on her face. It's going to change her." Change her. The words echoed in my mind. Claire, always so beautiful, so vibrant, now potentially marked forever. A physical reminder of my own actions. "Where's Anna?" I asked, suddenly remembering my daughter. "She's with my parents," Sarah said. I didn't want her to see Claire like this. Anna, my daughter, caught in the crossfire of my revenge. I wanted to hold her, to protect her from the horrors of the adult world. I could no longer see any good coming from my actions. The police questioning had felt like an autopsy on my soul. They dissected my anger, my betrayal, my thirst for revenge with cold, clinical precision. I had confessed everything, laid bare my darkest impulses. There was a strange sense of relief in the act of confession, but it was quickly overshadowed by the crushing weight of my actions. I learned that Mika had been quietly spiraling for months, her obsession with Tony festering in the shadows. She saw Claire as an intruder, a usurper who had stolen away her imagined happiness. In her twisted logic, Claire had to be punished. Tony had contacted me before he left, but I had to ask Claire. The hospital room was sterile and oppressive. The air hung heavy with the antiseptic scent of infectant and the unspoken weight of what had happened. Claire lay in the bed, propped up by pillows, her face a landscape of bandages. Only her eyes were visible, and they were filled with a haunted, distant sadness that pierced my heart. I pulled up a chair beside the bed and took her hand. Her skin felt cool and fragile beneath my touch. "How are you feeling?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question felt hollow, inadequate in the face of what she had endured. "Scared," she admitted, her voice raspy and weak. and, ashamed, I squeezed her hand gently. "Don't be," I said, forcing a note of reassurance into my voice. "This isn't your fault. Mika was unstable. This is not a rational action of something you did or didn't do." She shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the confines of the room. "It is, Desmond. In a way, it all is. If I hadn't cheated, none of this would have happened." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken truths. She was right, of course. Her actions had set in motion a chain of events that had led to this moment. But I also knew that I had played a role, that my own thirst for revenge had fueled the flames of this tragedy. The room fell silent. We sat there for a long time, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the machines monitoring her vital signs. The silence was filled with the ghosts of our past, the memories of our shared laughter, our whispered secrets, our dreams for the future. All of it now tainted, fractured, perhaps irrevocably broken. "Tony called," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "He wanted to see you before he left town." Claire's eyes widened, a flicker of pain flashing across her face. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "I can't. I don't want to see him again. Not now. Not ever." I nodded, relieved. I understood her decision. There was nothing left to say, no words that could possibly undo the damage that had been done. I spent the rest of visiting hours sitting with Claire, trying to fill the silence with small talk, with stories about Anna. I told her about Anna's latest drawing, about the funny things she had said at dinner, about her unwavering belief that her mother was the most beautiful woman in the world. As I spoke, I watched Claire's face, searching for some sign of recognition, some glimmer of hope, but all I saw was pain and weariness. The vibrant, confident woman I had once known seemed to have vanished, replaced by a fragile, broken shell. As visiting hours came to an end, I stood up to leave. I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle. I looked back at Claire, lying in the hospital bed, her face swathed in bandages, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. I thought of our wedding day, of the vows we had exchanged, of the promise we had made to love each other for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Were those just empty words? Was there anything left salvage from the wreckage of our marriage? Do I forgive my wife? The question still echoed in my mind, a persistent, nagging doubt. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive her for what she had done. The betrayal had cut too deep. The wounds were too raw. But I also knew that I couldn't let hatred consume me, that I couldn't allow my anger to define the rest of my life. I took one last look at Claire, memorizing the shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the ghost of a smile that still flickered on her lips. I knew that this might be the last time I ever saw her. Not as I remembered, but as she would be in the future. It broke my heart that I would not know. Turning, I stepped out of the hospital room, closing the door softly behind me. The decision hung in the balance, unresolved, uncertain. Walking through the hospital's sterile halls, I realized that this was not about Claire anymore. It was about Anna, and I needed to make the choices that would let her live a life of happiness. But I also could never forget Claire. Her smile, her laugh, her beauty, everything that was lost, it all weighed on me.